we had almost 10 years of out grinding and making a living.
Felt like, again, that failure as a mom. I was missing everything, and I won't necessarily blame the business. I will blame him and I for not always figuring that balance out.
We lived, eat, and breathed the center.
What was important, and that was my family life and my marriage, and it suffered.
We struggled, we tightrope. It's scary for us, but we're taking some big steps. I think that our story, where we've been, where we're at, where we're going, what we thought we'd do is start with the very end of our story, and then we'll take you back to the beginning. This piece might be a little bit inspirational, maybe some of our story might be. Let's start with where we're going.
Quack, quack, quack. Good news, the ducks do quack. When we make them quack, quack, quack.
So me looking changes lot of pikinini that other small ones where time me fala sing, me fala dream ota action songs, then me fala reading ota poems, then action, or kata dream too. So me looking also ota learn a lot from something where save the children and helping me. Good. My body na full body pattern. Listen, time Auntie John name me,
These are the kind of dreams that we have. That's where we're going. We would love the opportunity to get to second and third world countries, to learn about and impact lives that are so foreign to us and communities. So it takes a lot of dreaming and work behind that for us to possibly get there. Not only that, but also working with other child care providers, owners, and centers throughout the country. We've already started doing some of that through my consulting efforts, and we really love that. But more so, the opportunity to be able to travel and impact lives of little children beyond Mesa County. So that's where we're going. So let's talk about where it all started.
Not too far from here, that's where I grew up, and lived on a farm. But I grew up great, horses, cows, pigs, dogs, cats, the whole 9 yards. So my mom had remarried, and my stepdad was basically my dad for a long time. That will probably play into a lot of what Kirk and I will talk about, things that we did, how I was raised by a man that wasn't my father, but stepped in and took that role. I called him dad. He was there for everything for a long time. And that was important to me, and that's how I always viewed family. I've always viewed it just like us at the center.
I grew up in what I was teased by Kim a little bit early on as a bit of a Leave It to Beaver family. My parents were married for close to 40 years. But we grew up in pretty simple means, but we were spoiled and loved upon. My dad was in sales. He was an Iowa farm kid. My mom was a teacher. I grew up the son of a salesman. And so I've always been a salesman, and it's just in my blood, and with a little bit of teacher blended in there. But I was selling postcards door to door when I was probably 12, 13 years old. Sold soap out of a briefcase when I was same age. Literally. Had like an old round 70s suitcase, you know, that your great-great-grandma has in her closet and still pulls out to threaten you once in a while with it, and load up with soap, and I'd go sell it door to door just because that was in my blood, and still is a bit. You know, at 16 years old, we were involved with Amway, right? Like network marketing. So we'd travel 4 times a year to all kinds of conventions, and that was like, you know, I'm seeing Mini-Me now and Shad at that same age, you know, and instead of going up skiing, he wants to work on his website, you know, for his drop shipping business that he's doing. And so by 20 years old, I was off selling fire alarms across Washington State. But I'm with Kim on that. I mean, college education can be a great thing. So can YouTube when you try to figure out how to replace a belt on a dryer, right?
A lot of my college education, one degree I got early on, one I got later on, but as we went into kind of our work life, a lot of you probably don't know this, but I worked for the state of Colorado. I was actually an officer in men's prison, medium secure in Canyon City for 8 years. At the time I was actually married to my first husband. I was working graveyard, he was working swing shift, and I actually worked until the day I had Taylor. So I had both kids at that point. That was pretty tough for me to admit that failure. You know, that was hard. I was a professional. I was in an industry that I felt like I was excelling, and I was, you know, getting promoted, and I was doing so well, and then this part of my life basically fell apart. And it's kind of a hard thing when you've had a dad not be there, and you've had a stepdad who eventually left, and then you have a husband that you didn't, that didn't work out.
So where Kim went off with a full ride scholarship, she had several schools to choose from. I thought about a four-year university, but also was raised, I was paying for it. And then I hit the road. I was working I was volunteering in a fire department, wanted to be a paramedic. And so I was doing that for a couple years, and ran into my brother and my dad got involved in a fire alarm company. So I started selling fire alarms at 20 years old, started that for about a year. The guy I was working for wrote me a $30,000 check 20 some years ago and said, pay me back in 3 months. And off I went, and I took my own dealership. We have so many of you that, you know, from in high school looking and trying to figure out what you want to do. We were there. To transitioning out of high school and going, what path am I going to take? What career is right for me? We were there. We didn't start discovery until we were 30. And so we had, you know, almost 10 years of out grinding and making a living, and very differently, the two of us. From our work family perspective, we just want to let you know that we can relate to a lot of experiences and a lot of things that you're processing, some of you, at some times in your life. Because we've had a little bit of life experience, we can relate to some of those things, and we're, you know, in a position where we can provide some support and comfort. I married a Colorado girl in Washington, and then moved to Oregon, and then her mother had breast cancer, and so we moved from Oregon to Grand Junction back in '97, and we had Riley. That marriage lasted 4 years. Kim's first marriage lasted 4 years. I was here, I was switched companies, I was selling legal services, was a corporate trainer. I traveled to Denver once a month, traveled, worked hard, but always self-employed. I feel like I'm sometimes a pretty good boss. I'd probably be a terrible employee though. That's how I got to Grand Junction.
I got introduced through some business things, probably the sheriff's department, different things, and she owned that center and asked if I would consider, because I was considering quitting what I was doing. I was working so many hours, I was not even raising my own kids. That was a huge deal for me. If I would consider taking on a director's job for her center. Back then, you didn't have to have quite as many classes as you do now. So I got the classes real quick and decided that that's what I would do. That didn't change my hours very much. I was working 12s and 15s and taking my kids with me. But at least I had my kids. I had my girls with me. They were at the center. I was teaching and a director in the center. And I worked for her for a while, and that's when this came about.
We were both married for 4 years, then we were both separate or divorced for 2 years. Meanwhile, we were both doing that single parenting thing. And I think that really prepared us for this, right? Jeez, oh pizza.
Sending your kid to be cared for by somebody else and working so many hours that you felt like you weren't raising your own children, that I felt like, again, that failure as a mom. I was missing everything, and things just were not fitting quite right for me.
So literally, we got married, and I said, just like this, what do you want to do? And she said,
I'd like to own my own center. After I'd been working for somebody for a while, I realized I wasn't all that. I was a great employee, but not a boss employee. I had to be a supervisor in a way, and I didn't mind that. I loved the girls that worked for me, but I decided if I was going to do it, I wanted to make my own rules.
6 months later, we opened up Discovery Kids. And that was 19 years ago in February this month. We dove into, here we're starting a business together after 6 months of being married and being in business with family. Like, raise your hand if you would love to go into business with your significant other and you want to eat it, breathe it, live it, spend 16 hours or 12 hours a day doing business, and then try to be married couple on the other side of that. Balance is just like almost an impossible thing, and that's the tightrope that we've walked for all these years. Again, we lived, eat, and breathed the center. And so, yeah, it was just 2 years of just the most intense challenges, with Kim's passion in the classroom and knowledge there, and mine and knowledge in the business, and just there was a lot of lightning storms in the center and in the home.
It was tough. I think that it was a good break for me to get out and get to stay home with Shad for a little while. It gave us a breather, let us rebuild a little bit of our marriage, because when you're putting so much into something else, it takes away from something. Always keep that in mind. If you get really focused on one thing and you pour yourself and you empty yourself and you're not getting refilled, something's going to suffer. For me, that was my marriage, and that was not the only time it happened in this business. I won't necessarily blame the business. I will blame him and I for not always figuring that balance out. When you've both done it for so long and it is your passion, you get so wrapped up in it and so consumed, you tend to forget, for me, what was important, and that was my family life and my marriage, and it suffered several times.
Life can be short, and for some, way too short, right? See so many young people and they get taken, and this is where our drive, as I started off, like, where are we going? We want to make impact wherever we can while we can. We struggled, we tightrope, right?
That was with one.
And then we said, I said to her, I want to have another baby. And she's like, well, I can't anymore. I said, no, not that kind of baby. Let's go open up another center.
And we did.
And then it was like starting over. We had a lot of stuff in place. Junction hit 8 years this February. Whether we're physically present or not, we really want you to know that emotionally, we've never disconnected. What I want to do is figure out how I can support you all directly and indirectly by helping to grow and support an administrative team that does phenomenal things and is still learning to grow in their roles as well. My goal of being able to work remote will be essential when we're immersing ourselves in other communities as well. It's scary for us, but we're taking some big steps. That's where we're going, but we haven't left yet. And we're here to support you. We're here to continue to partner with you. We want to spend this next year and a half, if you will, building and creating supports. And again, that's where we'll get to those papers here after lunch and figuring out how we can shore up the weaknesses that we have in our systems, in our training, in our curriculum, in our support, in our admin, in ownership, whatever that is, to help and support on you guys.